Okay. Today we're going to be joined by our good friend, Erik Barzeski. Did I get it right? I got it right, right?
Good job. Good job. Yeah, nice.
7 for 7. 7 for 7. I got it. I'm on a roll. Erik and I go back a ways, and it's always good to catch up with old friends. So let's start with the basics. We'll go with the Cliff Notes version of how you got to where you got now.
Yeah, I didn't start playing golf till I was 14 or 15. I spent my birthday and Christmas money on a set of golf clubs from my great uncle. And so I got into golf late. I played soccer from when I was 3 on. So that does lead to one weird thing where I think most people, if there's trouble left, they swing to the right. Whereas I'm more likely to swing to the left because since I played soccer and a little bit of tennis and some other sports where the ball spins and you have to be able to manipulate that, I would curve the ball away from trouble where other people swing away from trouble. I think like 95% of people, if there's OB left, they swing to the right. And then I'd see this on my college golf team. The ball would hook out of bounds all the time when they never hit a draw, except on that hole. Whereas I'm more likely to swing toward the OB, knowing the ball will curve away from the out of bounds, as long as I manage the face a little bit. But that's my background in soccer. Yeah, soccer, I think, led to me thinking about curve and controlling the ball differently than I think most people do. I didn't play in college. The college coach told me there was one spot open, and I had it, even though the guy I played with could have beat everyone else on the team. So I took it as not a serious operation and chose not to play on that college team. So he and I played a bunch of rounds and graduated with degrees in French, computer science, and medicinal chemistry. I did tech stuff, website stuff, software stuff for a few years after college. Never really thought much about golf. I played golf casually, a little bit back then. Didn't really get into lessons. I was self-taught to that point, got down to about the most frustrating 1.4 handicap because every shot was just a little thin, which they go pretty straight. So like you don't have to worry about like missing left and right, but every shot was just a little thin. So I took lessons with Dave Wedzik, and it was the first time that I had seen that there was a logic and a flow and rational reasoning and cause and effect and geometry and physics and things like that that could be applied to the golf swing. And this is almost 20 years ago at this point. So prior to that, my experience with golf instruction, just observing other people getting lessons on the range where I was practicing, was the instructor would just say a bunch of things and throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what stuck. A lesson might involve the instructor saying 15 things, thinking like, oh, now try this. Oh, now try this. It's like, I didn't see the point in that. I didn't see the logic or the flow, right, of that kind of thing. Dave was the first guy who had kind of a system or a method, or not, those words get confused all the time, but he had a process. He had an idea about this causes this is the priority, let's work on this first, etc. Dave had worked with Mike Bender, which is where he met Mike Bennett at the time, right? Both came from Mac O'Grady, had a Mac O'Grady background a little bit. Pretty quickly, like that winter, I decided to turn professional and start to teach. So, we ran a clinic in Scottsdale for Mike Bennett and Andy Plummer, and we were the first Stack and Tilt Academy in the world that wasn't Mike and Andy. We were the first authorized whatever in the world for a year and a half, 2 years. We always taught it as there wasn't a lot of information out about it then, so it was conversations with Mike and Andy, and it was what Dave had learned from Mike Bender, because he kind of assumed it was kind of a Mike Bender-ish pattern, basically a centered pivot. You go forward on the downswing, the hands go in, you send the club head first, from the top, some other things like that. I can easily say that in the first week that James Hirschfield was here, which was the first full year we taught Stack and Tilt, we changed how we taught it from the official or the accepted models, meaning like we said, they were big on left tilt causing a lot of things. And I said, your spine left tilt's about 5 or 10 degrees. Most of the left tilt comes from the pelvis,
right,
turning on its inclined angle, right? And you can just feel like you turn around your chest or turn around your spine. I don't love the words turn around your spine because your spine moves too, but turn around your spine, most of that comes from just being bent over and just turning like that. So we never taught shoulder down quite as much as it's taught because the geometry of a circle is fairly obvious. You know, the shoulder doesn't go down as much as it goes across. It goes across a lot more than it goes down. We never taught that you stayed forward. I bought 2 bathroom scales from Walmart the second week, and 2 things. Number one, it was incredibly strange how little movement was required to shift your pressure or weight, because if you're not moving, it's the same, like 60-40 or 65-35 to the trail side. In fact, just moving your arms there will do it. And most of your rib cage and stuff is in front of your spine, so that rotating to the trail side moves
Takes the
mass
weight.
to the trail side. So we never taught it as forward always, right? Or moving forward always, or staying forward always. We always taught it as a moderate pressure shift and weight shift and mass shift to the trail side and then forward. So we always taught it that way because that's what was actually happening. And it was very easy to see with rudimentary tools because we didn't have force plates. We didn't have gears 15, 16 years ago at the time. We were then, so as things went on, we started to butt heads a little bit more with the way we were teaching it versus the way it was taught. And we were trying to, in my opinion, and you know, it's mine, so I'll say it, like we were trying to pull some people forward a little bit and they didn't want to be pulled forward. Then Medicus approached Dave Wedzik with Chuck Evans to create what they called 5 simple keys. Okay. I was pulled in as kind of the director of instructor development or the director of instructor training. I didn't really have a super official title, but I made all the training materials and helped organize the clinics and schools and classes that we would put on for over 100 instructors. And 5 simple keys was our understanding of the golf swing, right? We had 5 simple keys, which it just happened to be similar to like 10 words or something like that. It wasn't because of that. It was kind of the marketing angle of steady head was a centered pivot, right? Weight forward to impact. We always said impact because we were still teaching a centered pivot that the pressure and mass shifted a little to the trail side during the backswing and you move forward. During the downswing, we taught what we called inline impact. We called it flat left wrist originally, but then, you know, if you have a Lee Westwood had inline impact, so we called it that. So basically the proper amount of shaft lean, right? You don't want too much shaft lean. You don't want too little shaft lean. Club face control and diagonal sweet spot path, basically controlling the face and the path into the ball. We taught those as the 5 things that if you could get better at that, you could get better at golf. And we found if you could kind of assess someone, their handicap tracked pretty well with how many of those keys they kind of had mastered, or at least gotten pretty good at. If you had mastered none of the keys at all, you weren't a very good golfer. If you had mastered 5, you were mastered, you'd be playing professional golf probably. If you were pretty good at it, you'd be scratch or plus territory, right? And even week to week on the PGA Tour, when guys miss cuts, it was because their club face control was usually not quite there, right? So even at the game's highest levels, the stuff held. I still teach those things, right? We did that for 2.5 years or longer than that. It was the best-selling golf DVD on the market for over 3.5 years. Dave and Chuck did very well with that. I was just in charge of putting the materials together for training instructors. Chuck was older. Dave had a younger family. I had a younger family, but I just have 1 kid, so I didn't mind as much. So neither of them wanted to travel as much as we were doing. So we kind of calmed down on how much we were traveling to teach instructors. We were also starting to teach a little bit more of in-person lessons, and, you know, that was taking time and stuff too. You know, it had a good run. I still use the ideas every day. I still think almost every full swing lesson deals with one of those 5 things. And so we did that. And then around that time too, then Dave and I also wrote Low Score Wins, which predates almost everything. It came out like a month after Mark Brody's Every Shot Counts came out. We had written it and finished it almost a month before that. I'm glad that his book came out because we were able to just quickly edit a few footnotes in that backed up what we were saying to support that from his book. So we were able to quickly go through his book, cite a few things as footnotes and supporting evidence in what we had written. But we had tested, a few hundreds of shots and thousands of shots and hundreds of golfers doing some things, and applied our own statistics and studies that we had done in not only the biggest part of the book. I mean, the first section of the book is a little bit of technique stuff. The second section of the book is a little bit of how to practice, because golfers don't know how to practice or what skills they should practice the most. And the third section was our game planning and course strategy section that I still think was the first of its kind and has since been copied a few times by some people and has made some money for those people, and fine, because we put the book out there and it was available to anyone that wanted to read it. And I still ship copies every week. We've sold over 60,000 copies, which is a lot for a golf book to sell. It's not a Stephen King novel or anything like that, but it's done well for itself.
Yeah, so you guys were pioneers in a lot of areas, that, and it just goes under the radar. So for those that weren't around in that time frame, they really don't know where a lot of this stuff originated. So
yeah, I think so. We're not great at talking about ourselves and promoting ourselves in that way. Don't get me wrong, I'll certainly upset some people by saying what I want to say, but it's almost never just bragging or promoting myself. I'm always just trying to discuss and share. And I've always said too, I like when someone can tell me you're wrong and here's why, because then if they can say you're wrong and here's why, if they say you're wrong, you're an idiot, stop talking, that doesn't do anything for me. If they can say you're wrong, here's why, then I listen, because if I have an instant chance to upgrade my knowledge, I'm going to take that. If they can say, I come from a scientific background. If you could say you're wrong, here's why, your hypothesis failed. Most scientific experiments didn't occur when someone's hypothesis was proved correct. Most scientific advancements have come when someone was like, I thought this would happen. This thing happened. What the heck? What happened there?
Most of the time, they'll discover a bunch of stuff by accident looking for.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can tell me I'm wrong and why, then I'm excited, because I can instantly learn something. I could say, oh my, right? And that happened with, for example, when I got gears about 5 years ago, I looked at all of my previous assumptions, because all we had up to that point was 2D. All I had up to that point was 2D. And, I could watch what other people were doing and stuff like that, but I didn't have it for myself to test and look at things and pull up. If I wanted to look at how far the left arm or the lead arm went across the chest for almost every good player that, there's over 50 or 60 tour players 5 years ago in the database that I had. And so I looked at how far the lead arm went across the chest in all of them. And then I started to see what my amateur players were doing. And that was one of the biggest differences that I saw. It's like, if 95% of PGA and LPGA tour players are doing this thing, and golfers are doing very much not that thing, then that's probably one of the true commonalities of the game's best players. I will give credit to Second Tilt for liking, or for saying that they were trying to find the commonalities of the game's best players, because that's kind of an approach that I still apply. I mean, the problem is that they kind of failed at actually getting to some of the true commonalities of the game's best players, because almost none of the game's best players start forward, stay forward, and then go more forward during the swing, for one example. But if you move your left arm, if you're a righty, across your chest 20 degrees, if you're a PGA or LPGA tour player, and the average golfer moves their left arm across their chest 40 degrees, and that first group of players is really good, and the second group of players is really not good, then maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe moving your left arm across your chest 40 degrees is not the way to play your best golf. So I looked at everything I could look at. I looked at how much the trail knee flexed or extended during the swing. I looked at how much hip turn people had. I looked at how much tilt and bend and how much their elbow bent, right? Tour players, by and large, keep their right elbow wider than 90 degrees. Average golfers, generally, we see numbers that are 110, 120 degrees of flex. right? So that angle would be smaller than 90 degrees if they've bent it from straight more than 90 degrees. So I'll see 110 every week, 120 more often than you think you should. Yeah, Rory bends his trail elbow 60 degrees, and I have amateurs players doubling that, right? So
So,
the AMG guys said it well. They said oftentimes amateur players make more complicated, more difficult swings than tour players. So a lot of people like to say, "Well, I'm not a tour player. I can't swing the way they swing." Yet they swing in a more complicated way than the tour
and the
players. Tour
average tour
players have
players.
simpler, easier swings. They do them really fast, and they do them really consistently. But the actual motion is a simpler, easier swing to make than the swings of most amateur golfers. One of my better friends has a I call it a Dairy Queen loop at the top. It's just like this, right? And that's not that's a complicated thing. If you gave that to Scotty Scheffler or something like that, sure, he might shoot 72, but he's not going to win major championships. He's not going to do what he does. Right? Amateur golfers are also always looking at outliers to justify their weird swing. They'll be like, well, Matt Wolff does this, or well, Jim Furyk does this, or well, Ray Floyd rolled it inside, or whatever. But I
Yeah.
recommend they look at the 90 or 95% of the tour players that are in the middle and what they do and the true commonalities, not what the outliers on the PGA Tour do, because there's a reason they're outliers.
Yeah, I think that, that is a weak subterfuge or a weak argument for swinging incompetently, and it kind of justifies bad mechanics a lot of times. Now, going back to what you've been talking about, so you said you were a soccer player, so you understood, curvature. It's ironic that, I forgot the guy's name, Tom, he was with the Rams in the I don't know, was say the '70s. So he had the
It's
field
before my time slightly.
right, but, he had the field goal record, the longest field goal, Tom Dempsey. He had the longest field goal record, right? And then Hasbro or Mattel came out with a, toy. It was called the Super Kick or something, super anyway, you bang the helmet, and the guy would kick straight. He was a straight kicker, a straight leg kicker, and he hit it 63 yards. And then they got all these soccer guys that had the right biomechanics, and 70-yard field goals were all in play, you know? So there's a certain amount of that one has if you have some kind of background, you can intuitively pick things up just by, so I played when I started playing, pitch and putt, which is how I started playing.
Mm-hmm.
I was a really good pool player. So I knew once I figured out how to use those grooves on that balata, that putting green became a pool surface, you know what I mean? I could make it work, and once I figured it out, I
Right.
said, "Okay." So it was kind of, it's a great way to learn to s if you're into other sports, there's always some kind of transferable skills that you have.
There's definitely, I regret that when I was a kid, we would leave the house in the morning at 7 in the morning and we didn't have cell phones, so we would bike around to other people's houses and be like, hey, "Is Tommy home?" "No, I think he's at the baseball field." So we'd ride over to the baseball field, and we basically did stuff outside all day. It wasn't always sports. Sometimes it was just, you know, throwing rocks into the creek and seeing how many skips that could make. It's an athletic thing, but it's not necessarily a sport. But we were outside, we were climbing, we were jumping, we were running, we were doing all kinds of things. Kids these days, when they do get into sports and they're not just playing on their phones, they tend to specialize way too quickly, right? They don't play a lot of other sports.
Right,
And some of my better golfers, when they become 14 and 15 and 16 and 17, are barely starting to specialize or still playing another sport at a decently high level for what they are. Like some of my better golfers right now also play tennis. And you can
right,
relate a lot of things to tennis or even table tennis. I don't even care, right? It's the same thing. We're still moving a kind of a club face or a racket face and affecting a ball, right? And so to hit a top spin forehand, that is similar to a draw feeling, as, kind of a backspin drop shot is similar to a cut feeling. So you can leverage other things and other experiences. Plus, just the fact that if you learn to play a bunch of basketball or volleyball, you learn to use your legs differently than someone who's sitting on a chair playing on their phone. So just building up that
Yeah.
athletic, that's one of the things that I think we've lost a little bit in the past. And I try very hard not to be a back in my day guy and do all that stuff. But I think we've lost that in the modern era where people specialize too often, and when they aren't playing a sport, they're not doing much of anything. They're just sitting around playing on their phones or gossiping. I mean, it's a joke about like kids have parties nowadays, but they all just sit in the same room, but they're all still on their phones, and they'll text
Looking
each
at
other
those, yeah.
across the room instead of
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, Susie, like, what do you think of
Right.
this?" So, yeah.
So, yeah, somebody yesterday mentioned uh, Alex Morrison, who's, a legendary. He really he wasn't a golf coach. He was the tennis coach, and somehow the head pro didn't show up, and he said, "Hey, you need to fill in," and that's how he put all his tennis stuff in there. Now, going back to, and I don't want to beat a dead horse about 2012. Going back to 2012 or 2010, I don't remember. John Foley takes on Tiger Woods, right?
hmm Which I think
Stack it,
was good in some ways at the time. I wasn't a fan of what he was doing with Hank Haney, but certainly it's
but you
interesting
were
too
you
that
you
the
were
best
you
player
were
of all
one of the you were one of the detractors back then. But here's my point on that is that as you described 5SK, 5 Simple Keys,
hmm
and Stack and Tilt was claiming that he was plagiarizing them, I think in the end, what Foley was doing with Tiger was more akin to what you and Dave were doing than Stack and Tilt, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm not claiming in any way that we looked at 5 Simple Keys as just classifying what any good golf lesson should be or any good golf swing should be. So every good instructor at the time was, except maybe Jimmy Ballard, because the steady head thing, almost every good instructor at the time. I mean, there were very few instructors telling people, move your head backward a foot during the backswing and move it forward 2 feet during the downswing or anything like that. So there were no good instructors telling their students not to manage the club face in the path or to have a good, inline impact or something like that. So none of those things were like revolutionary in the sense of we came up with them and like, wow, this is a whole new way to look at the golf swing. It was just a way to help. We taught people with all kinds of backgrounds 5 Simple Keys, and they could all find a place in that because if you were working on one of those 5 things, it was probably a decent lesson. We may disagree on where the priority is or what the range or window or how much you could move in that is, but if you were teaching a 5 Simple Keys type lesson, if your lesson was oriented toward one of those 5 things, the student could probably get better, right? And there were a bunch of ways to do it, whether it was a Haney guy or whether it was a Jim McLean guy or anything like that. You could teach any of that stuff. So I mean, Sean Foley, I think, helped Tiger understand. Tiger always talked about like releasing the club and to hit draws and kind of almost like old ball flight law type stuff. And I don't even like to call them old ball flight laws because it's not like the laws change, it's just what people thought they were. So the old understanding of how the ball flew, was ball starts on the path and curves to where the face is pointing or whatever, and that stuff. I think in some ways, Tiger learned the correct ball flight laws from Sean Foley. And that was interesting because I saw one shot where I think he was on the right side of the 18th hole at Augusta National. He had pushed it into the right side and he got to hit a cut around the magnolia trees or whatever's over there on the right side. And it was the first time I saw him aiming the path farther left, but aiming the face left of the trees instead of like kind of just trying to use his skill to swing to the left of the trees, but pointing the face at the flag or something like that. And it was very obvious that he was doing a correct ball flight laws type shot instead of kind of just relying on his skill and hands to subconsciously create the right ball flight, but with the wrong
Yeah,
mental idea of what created ball flight. So I think Sean Foley was
but
good for a little bit. I think stuff got a little bit
Yeah,
out of out of
I believe I believe at that time it was nascent. It was early in the game. I know James Leach went down there to help him with the TrackMan stuff. I think they overdid it. I think there
Mhm.
was a lot of emphasis on zeroing out the path, not just Justin Rose was stuck on it. I don't know, but anyway. So when you say that, and again, a good friend, Andreas Cali, who's been very successful with European tour players. He says he gives credit to Andy for a lot, but he says my players come off my players shift. My players shift. You have to shift, is what he says, and I agree
There's
with
almost every athletic movement that you make involves a shift back. If you have to throw a football far, you're going to shift back. And now you start to shift forward while the football is still going backward, right? You're stepping. A baseball pitcher, same thing. You know, if you're hitting a tennis ball, you're stepping forward while the racket is still going back. So there's a timing to that, but the initial movement is away so that you have more room to move
moment.
forward, right? I see a lot of people who are afraid of swaying. Like swaying is a
Right,
bad word in both directions sometimes for people. And
right,
while we like a centered pivot doesn't mean you don't move anywhere. A center
right.
pivot just means your head doesn't move around a lot, right? We called it steady head. There's not really a word that means moving around a little bit, but steady kind of
Fixed
has
head.
that
Fixed
fixed head,
head
right? Means
is
not moving at
that's the one
all.
description is like
Right. Yeah. Still head, that doesn't work because still is steady kind of had the connotation of moving around a little bit, but not like a lot.
gives you some leeway.
Right. You can move around a little bit. If your head stays kind of in a big bubble, then that's probably fine, right? That's all we need. But there's not a sport where your head is still or you just start in one place and only go forward, really, right? Almost everything involves a little bit of counter movement, both so you can build momentum in the forward direction and also so you have a little bit more room to move in the forward direction. So,
Right. Yeah. So you guys were. I mean, I still Dave's always been a good guy, and he's a gentleman. He sent me a copy of the lowest score wins. There was no 5SK book, was there?
not
But
publicly,
DVDs. There are a bunch of DVDs,
not one that
right?
we created, right? The company created a book from the DVDs that we had no part in at
Which
the
was
time.
Medicus, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, the five simple keys was a precursor to a lot of what people have made apps which are eerily similar to what your guys' work, and other guys have written books. And
Well, like I said, 5 simple keys is any
no, I'm
golf
talking
lesson.
about
Yeah.
lowest score, lowest.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's certainly been some copies, like I said. We put it out there, so
Yeah, it is what it is.
I'm proud of the work that we did on Low Score Wins. Like I said, I still ship books every week. I shipped 4 yesterday that we had gotten. So it's still
So
selling. It's
let's
been 12 years. Okay, so I think that's done pretty well. Would I change some parts of it? Not much of the game planning or strategy part. That stuff is still pretty much the same. Golfers are still bad at understanding partial shots gained and lost. I think understanding fractions of a shot gained and lost is tough for golfers. They think of things as very binary. You know, they hit a tee shot kind of behind a tree into the right rough. They don't want to hit the tree, so they play it out a little bit to the left. It goes into a bunker, greenside bunker. They splash the bunker shot out to 8 feet, and then they miss that putt, and they go, oh man, if I could putt, I would have made a par. It's like, well, your tee
right,
shot went behind a tree. You actually hit a pretty good shot from there. And then you hit a really good bunker shot to 8 feet for your level of golfer. And then you were 50-50 at best. If you're a tour player, you were probably 60-40 to miss that putt. So you did what's expected on the putt, right? Tapped in for your bogey. And you're blaming the putt because A, it's the last thing that happened. And B, because that's a make or a miss. And it's a full shot in your mind, even though really you lost zero point 0.4 of a shot or whatever on that one. And you
right,
lost another 0.4 of a shot on the tee shot, and you lost another zero point 0.2 of a shot or whatever on the shot you hit into the bunker, and then you gained some on the bunker shot because it was actually good for your skill level. Golfers are bad at understanding partial shots gained and lost. So I probably wouldn't rewrite much in the game planning section. I'd rewrite a little bit. We've learned some things in the full swing or the technique part of it, the first part of it a little bit. But on the whole, I'm proud of what we did there. Wouldn't change a lot. I would change a few little details here and there. But yeah,
So
it's done well.
so now we go past the 5 simple keys era, and now we're getting into launch monitors. So I know your facility, or the original facility, you guys made a huge capital investment in technology. So let's go into the decision process of let's start with the launch monitors.
Yeah, we owned a TrackMan, and at the time, FlightScope was obvious. It was FlightScope and TrackMan were about the only two games
Yeah.
in town, really. So we actually had TrackMan at the time. I think it was the TrackMan 2 era. I don't think it was the 1. We owned the TrackMan. We had it. We owned it. FlightScope was saying, hey, we think we're better. We're like, okay, let's see. Because we could easily sell the TrackMan if we wanted to and buy a FlightScope. And we ended up doing that. But they came to us with a phantom camera. You know, I did the math on because obviously you can't just look at angle attack from a video because, I won't get into it, but, you're swinging on a tilted angle, of course. So it's not always exactly that. And so we had 12,000 frames per second hitting a bunch of shots. And this was indoors where TrackMan is on level footing because at the time, TrackMan was not good with divots. Divots would often just result in no read. So we were on mats. We were testing angle of attack primarily. That was the biggest area of disagreement maybe between the outputs of the launch monitors. We did that. We did that over a day, and the guy was here for another day and a half after that. So then we hit flop shots and we hit putts and we did all kinds of other stuff since we had a phantom camera, right? They cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So while we had it, we kind of messed around with it. But yeah, we ended up switching over to FlightScope. At the time, we were one of the first people to buy the Swing Catalyst force plate, which we did 13 years ago or whatever it was. That was kind of that was right before 5 Simple Keys, actually, that we bought the Swing Catalyst. And we put out some videos and we did some things on that. Golfers were even worse at understanding force and pressure and things back then as they are now. And it's a very odd thing because, force plates are great. And I use them a lot more for short game and putting than I think a lot of people do. I actually think they're almost better to use there than in the full swing because the full swing is so fast. And it's confusing to a lot of people because, for example, on the downswing, I'll just pretend you're a righty, everyone listening. So your left leg through your left foot pushes toward the golf ball, but it doesn't move toward the golf ball because you're standing on the ground, so there's friction there. So you push toward the golf ball to push your left hip back away from the golf ball and open up. That seems odd to people, right? They're like, I want to move this way. Well, yeah, but you have to push this way and then that thing won't move. It's like if you put your hand against the wall and, your elbow's bent and whatever, and you push, the wall doesn't go anywhere, but you push your shoulder back.
Go back, yeah.
Right, you push your shoulder back. So you can find ways to make it understandable for the people a little bit more. But conceptually at first, it's a kind of a hurdle to get people over understanding force plate stuff. Now you can say okay, you're not getting forward early enough. You can say just stuff like that. People, and that you can simplify things for them. I'm not saying that everyone that comes in is confused when they leave with a force plate lesson. Not at all. But just understand the concepts, people can look at stuff and you almost have to really quickly assess how much they can see the information. And engineers tend to be better at understanding forces and, opposing forces and things like that.
Torques and all that.
Right. They tend to be a little bit better at it. So they can understand that if I push this way, there's going to be a resulting force back this way, and other things. So we had one of the first force plate out there. I waited a while to get gears. We have gears. Of course, we had Sam Putt Lab and some other things, but we waited a while to get gears because the software was not quite maybe where it is in the past 5 years. It was a little rough early on. But I was watching and following along with the company and what they were doing for years after that. And so gears was one of the next big investments that we made. We're always kind of buying toys, we call them toys, but, partly for our own use. When I got gears, I was excited to put myself in there. It's like that was like at
Yeah.
least half the reason I splurged for it at the time. And then I ended up not getting in it nearly as often as I could. It's a lot easier now with Gears Hybrid, where you just put markers on your hat and a belt. Because I've had a marked up club of mine for years, so that's easy. But it's so much easier now because I can just pop in and make 5 swings, then pop out. I don't have to get the suit on and stuff. So that's great. But yeah, we've had launch monitors. I use mostly Foresight quads and quad maxes and stuff these days because indoors I think they're better. They track things a lot more, and you don't need, ideally like 30 plus feet of ball flight to really get accurate stuff. I don't get italic spin numbers with a quad. I'll put it that way.
Well, you're getting your photogrammetry versus Doppler, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if the ball goes 7 feet, it's still going to give you results. Yeah.
So when you talk about the forces, right? So how much of that in an athletic motion goes on just intuitively? And when you try to micro quantify it or explain it, it becomes complicated. It's like walking and chewing gum when somebody has to actually think about it, right?
Yeah. Well, I've heard of biomechanists. Their final exam is like, explain what needs to happen for a human being to walk 2 steps. And even when you break it down to that level, that becomes like, oh my goodness, like the amount of joints and the amount of muscles that need to be recruited to walk 2 steps. Because even if you just think about the legs, well, your arms swing a little bit. So, your chest rotates a little bit because your pelvis rotates a little bit. Like there's so many things that happen when your neck probably turns a little bit because your chest is turning, but you don't want to turn your head to walk. So because your eyesight would be wobbling side to side. There's so many things that happen. Almost every muscle is being used to walk 2 steps. And, people write 30 pages. I don't even know. I don't know. I'm not a biomechanist. I don't have that.
You're falling forward, right?
Yeah.
Your arms have to swing to counterbalance you, right?
All kinds of stuff's going on.
So all that's going on. If you try to have somebody think about it, they'd be pretty clumsy.
Yeah. Here's an example.
Try to reenact a simple step.
Yeah. Explain to someone how to walk from a biomechanist point of view, and it'll be 3 days and they still won't have gone anywhere.
Right.
Here's an example on force plates that, is just the reality of it, but not necessarily something you teach in a lesson. I got into arguments a long time ago with people that said that you push forward off your trail leg during the downswing. And I said, no, you don't. Like, we've hooked the EEG stuff up to people. We've measured muscle activity. Your right leg or trail leg isn't doing a whole lot during the downswing. It's bending during the downswing, right? Your right leg is bending more. Your right knee is bending more. If you were pushing, it would be extending, right? Your heel is coming up off the ground. Your foot is coming up off the ground. If you were pushing, you'd be flattening it into the ground. So just visually, you could know that. Hooking the muscle sensors up to people, we could measure that way to know we weren't doing it. So we had evidence to say we weren't doing it. And then when you get finally force plates that are good at measuring these things and are synced up properly and everything, we see that you shift away to start your backswing. And then by the time your club gets to your like P1.5, if you want to call it that, like before the club shaft even gets to parallel to the ground, P2, right? You're already pushing forward. Now, that doesn't mean you're moving forward. It means you're pushing forward because you have to stop the momentum and movement backward first. I've said that if you had a spring and you slid a block into the spring starts pushing back on the block as soon as it hits the block, but the block might still compress the spring a little bit before it starts to shoot back out. And so it's similar in the golf swing, right? We shift to our trail side and we start pushing forward almost immediately. And then by the time we get to the top of the backswing, we've started to move forward finally. We're almost done pushing then. Then it becomes almost a little fall, like your lead knee flexes a little bit. And so your momentum and your weight kind of push you there. And then your lead knee extends to both push you. We measure a vertical because we're standing on the ground, above the ground. So we get some vertical, but that helps you rotate your lead hip out of the way, right? And apply a braking force also to how forward you are. So you don't just keep going forward, right? It kind of rounds the energy around the corner a little bit
Right.
and takes your momentum and shoves it kind of behind you, right? And pushes it back behind
Sure.
you so you can get open. So people are completely unaware of that. If you say shift to your right and never push toward the target, shift to your right, don't shift to your left, don't push to your left. If they actually did that, they would fall over because even a little push to their right, they would just keep going, right? An object in motion wants to stay in motion. They would kind of keep going. So subconsciously, they stop themselves while they've pushed forward, right? But that doesn't register with a lot of people that's happened. Engineers and physicists and stuff get it. Even if they don't feel it, they understand it. But
Right.
that's one of those weird things that like, you're like, I almost never say, no, push forward later. It's almost always push forward earlier because really it starts almost as soon as you've started your backswing. And then it ends at the top of your backswing, just about, right? Because the proper sequence is lateral, rotational, vertical.
Rotational,
And
vertical,
all of
yeah.
those are done, I say, before, shaft parallel in the downswing, shaft horizontal in the downswing. The better the player, the faster they swing, the earlier those forces peak out. That's partly a matter of, I think this gets confused a lot of the time. In longer drive, higher swing speed players, it's often before P5 even, like left arm parallel or lead arm parallel in the downswing. It's often before that all the forces peak. But the time from I'll just say P5 to P7, is often almost the same amount of time as a slower swinger's time from P6 to P7. So if you think about that, people say, oh, you have to do it early enough, and that's true, for the force to get out to the club, right? So on
Right.
a long drive guy that's swinging 140 miles an hour or something, that time to go from P5 to P7 is often the same amount of time as some other guy to go from P6 to P7, because he swings his driver at 92 miles an hour, not 140. So that amount of time is often the same amount of time. So the timing might actually be the same relative to how much time it is, even if by position in the golf swing, it doesn't look like it's the same timing at all. Does that make sense?
Proportional. It's proportional.
Yeah.
Proportional to.
Oh, right. So that's one of those things that I think people misunderstand a little bit about ground reaction forces and the timing of it and force plates. And I will also say this. We went through a lull because I have smart to move force plates now. We still have our swing catalyst. We went through a lull where we didn't use it much, partly because it was tough to explain to people, partly because it was bulky and cumbersome and required, USB cameras and the PC and just a whole bunch of stuff. My smart to move plates work on an iPad, and it's easy, and they're portable, and they're separate plates, and I can put them on the putting green, and I can move them over to the chipping area, and I can, I haven't put them in a bunker yet because I think that would be bad for them, but with sand. But
They travel easily. They
travel easily. Yeah, they recharge. They're wireless. It's great. We went through a lull where we didn't use them a whole lot, and our argument at the time, which is still true. I own force plates. I use them fairly often, but it's still true. Nobody has 0% of ground reaction forces. Everyone is using them 75% effectively. And it's not like you're going to gain a ton of speed or consistency or whatever, just improving your ground reaction forces from 75% to 95% of effectiveness. Okay? Because everything else we do in the golf swing affects the ground reaction forces. Right? Dave and I have been on that platform for a while. Like, we went to see Mike Duffy a long time ago, to where we were trying to figure out, like, if you jump in the air and swing, like, it's not like you're going to not swing with any speed at all. You're still going to swing. So we all use the ground because we're standing on it, right? And there's always friction. So can you swing as fast as you can on ice? No, right? Because your body's going to twist the other direction. You're not going to be able to use the friction on the ground, but you're still going to swing. You're still going to swing with some speed. You're not going to not swing at all. So I think sometimes the idea of ground reaction forces does get overstated as far as how important it is. I've had a number of lessons that someone travels to me from. I had a guy from Tennessee. He drove up. He was there for the whole day. I put him on gears for his initial assessment. I said, okay, make 1, 2, 3 swings, whatever, on the force plates. Let me get that data. I honestly didn't even look at that data because I knew what we were going to work on from the gear stuff. We worked on the gear stuff for 3 hours. Again, he was there for the day. We worked on that. We took our time. really understood it because, he was going to go drive 8.5 hours or whatever back to Tennessee. So we worked on that for a while. I captured one swing on the force plates at the end, right, of this 3 hours. He went from 131% of his mass in the vertical. That was his peak vertical, was 131 before. Okay. Without working on the force plates, just working on gears and looking at all the 3D data, his only swing that he made after was 192%. So a massive increase, right? Almost a 50% increase in his vertical ground reaction force. And it was slightly earlier, right? He was closer to impact. And then afterward, it was almost 50% higher and just before P6.
So when should he be at his maximum spike?
Well, he's a 52-year-old, if I remember right. So he's going to be just before P6. We increased his swing speed by 8 miles per hour. I round up to 8. With a 7-iron.
Okay.
And we didn't use force plates to do it. We used force plates to, we used launch motors and gears and stuff to validate
use
like
the force plates to confirm
to show what changes we had made and what that resulted in. And so that's one of my favorite examples because that's like, we didn't need to use force plates, but force plates can still measure what happened. Force plates is still measuring what happens. Now, I'm on board with saying, if you do this with your wrists, that's probably not going to show up on a force plate. So there's a lot of things that show up in the golf swing, but force plates are a tool and they're valuable as a tool in the arsenal. I don't think anybody's saying that you should only ever use a force plate in a lesson and never use any other technology because, we have hack motion, we have force plates, we have launch monitors, we have 3D, we have all kinds of things. We have training aids that do other things. We've always had K-vests and all this stuff. We have video, is not necessarily a way of measuring, but a way of seeing what stuff looks like. Everyone has a camera. Everyone has a phone these days. Video cameras are great so long as we understand the limitations of what 2D is because we exist in 3 dimensions, but on 2D stuff gets very weird looking sometimes.
So I had this conversation with Monty, and maybe you can share your insight. So
he was just on our podcast. That episode just came out this morning.
He's good.
With Monty. Yeah.
He's really good. So when we look at the average golfer, and I'm talking about not the elite of the elite. Now we have these TrackMan charts, what the PGA Tour does. There's no senior tour chart, but there's an LPGA chart. We've had these constructs thrown our way where the low spot, Monty and I were talking about hitting up 5, which is, you really have to be in some good shape to hit up 5 degrees on a driver, but
you're probably a long drive guy that's hitting up 7 or 8 at that point. Yes.
Yeah. So I was thinking, we've been thrown this construct of your low point should be 4 inches ahead of the ball. And I'm thinking to myself, the average guy can't generate enough speed to have a 4-inch up low point. What do you think?
With a driver?
No, with an iron.
I think that gets into like club technology and all kinds of stuff though too, right? Modern clubs are very forgiving. I don't love how some people get almost like upset at like the loft jacking where a 7-iron turns into a 28-degree club or something like that, or a 27. I don't even know.
It's just a number.
Mine's still 35, right? They have to be that they have to be that loft because if you put a 35-degree super game improvement 7-iron in the bag, the thing would go straight up in the air. Like you couldn't hit it low enough, right? It would launch super high with no spin if you put 35 degrees of loft on a super game improvement 7-iron. So they had to jack the lofts. Otherwise, the ball just went straight up in the air. The launch angles would be through the roof. Right. The pitching wedge would go higher than it went forward or something. Okay. So, yeah. So I don't agree with that. So, like, you can do a lot with club fitting. I don't think that I've seen lessons from people that they'll say, okay, the average angle of attack with a 7-iron on the PGA Tour is 3.9 degrees. Right. 3.9 degrees down. Yes. And so I've seen lessons with people where someone is hitting 2.5 degrees down and they were working on getting them to hit more down. Dude, 2.5 degrees is so close to 3.9 degrees.
Yeah.
You're way within the window. There are PGA Tour major winners that hit 2 down and 6 down easily. Tom Watson was kind of famous for kind of picking the ball, right? I don't know what his angle of attack was. Yeah, I don't know what his angle of attack was with a 7-iron, but if it was 1.5 degrees, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm not saying it was, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone said, we measured 5 of his swings and they were like 1.5. So long as you can control where you hit the ground.
Right.
And the ball is right before that, like a microsecond before that, you can do whatever. Is it a little bit easier if you can hit down properly? Sure. But I think that a lot of people take angle of attack as, or where your low point's located, as some kind of gospel, and then try to go about doing it the wrong way.
That's where I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's where I'm heading. So if you took Tom Watson, Louis Oosthuizen, and Nick Price, right? They're all major champions.
Yep.
They have what the golf industry calls a full sweep release. They're releasing it and they're coming in. And what I'm finding for me is, even though, I spend a lot of time with this, the flying wedges and all that, and that's good stuff. But if I get 2 degrees, 3 degrees of shaft lean, I'm golden. If I have lineup, I'm okay with that. And I play pretty good golf without trying to see, what happens is people start getting steep into it. They misinterpret what guys like yourself are trying to explain, and all of a sudden they're tomahawking the club into the back, to the dirt, trying to get the deepest part of the divot, and they're deep. Maybe they're looking to get 4 inches deep with the divot and 4 inches long, and assuming that's optimal. So 1 degree of shaft lean, I just calculated, on a 7-iron is 5/8 of an inch, right? It's not even that, right? So 5 degrees of shaft lean is probably 2 inches or something like that. It's like, it's minuscule. Yeah. It's minuscule what you really need,
And if you think about it, as a general rule for better players, so people that can swing a 7-iron around 90 miles an hour or so.
Right.
The number on the bottom of the club for the clubs that they play is about the amount of shaft lean that you want. So like a 3-iron, I still carry a 3-iron. Maybe I'm dumb. I don't like how high hybrids go. I don't have to hit it very often, but I still have one in my bag. But
sure,
you generally want about 3 degrees of shaft lean with a 3-iron because the ball position's further forward in your stance.
Right.
You don't want 8 degrees of shaft lean with a 3-iron, or else you have no loft and you can't hit the ball in the air unless you swing ridiculously fast. So the slower you swing, the less shaft lean you generally want, because you don't have the ball speed to get the ball high enough in the air that it can go forward.
Exactly.
I mean, if you hit a putt, I don't care how, you're going to be hitting up on it. Like the long drive guys that hit a putt, and they hit a putter, 300 yards. They're hitting up on it a bunch because it has no loft, right? They can't hit a putter down. It has no loft. The ball would hit the ground 20 feet in front of where they're hitting the ball from, and that's only because it's teed up. So that was a weird example. But yeah, if you have too little loft, the ball doesn't get high enough in the air to carry farther. And a ball going through the air is generally going to go farther than one that hits the ground because there's a lot less friction in the air than on the ground. So yeah, some of my senior players, I had a senior guy. Monty has a similar story, since you mentioned him, where we've both had senior guys that swing their 7-irons at 70 miles an hour or 68 miles an hour or something like that, saying, I want to work on shaft lean. They're hitting their 7-irons 130 yards or whatever it is. I want to work on shaft lean so I can compress the ball and send it out there. Be like, great, you'll hit it shorter, right? You might raise your smash factor, right? I could teach you to lean the shaft and hit down more and do some other things, and your smash factor will go up. Your ball speed will actually go up, but you're going to hit shorter.
Right.
The
aerodynamics are working against you.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So you have to understand the whole picture of ball flight and stuff. And people say, "Oh, I want to hit a draw because it goes farther." Well, it doesn't have to. You can hit a fade that goes farther than a draw. It depends on how you manufacture it. Most people hit draws farther because they pull draw it, right? They close the face, they de-loft a little bit, and so it goes farther to a point. If you think about it, a duck hook doesn't go anywhere, right? You'd rather hit a push fade, that'll go farther than a duck hook because it's in the air longer. Duck hook hits the ground 100 yards off the tee sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, just increasing your smash factor or hitting down more or increasing shaft lean is not always the recipe to actually hit it farther.
Which brings me to my final point, right? So even though there's a plethora, so I'm not in New York right now, but I had these binders with clip outs of, all the articles that I thought were cool. And I had 200 pages, and that's about maybe 300 pages. That's about 20 years of information, print information. Right now, I could hit my smartphone and hit like this and get 40,000 times that. So the individual players, you don't know what really applies to you or how you're going to optimize yourself unless you have a person like yourself in front of you that can give you a proper assessment, right? So, I'm not going to go get a colonoscopy from a plumber, right? But there's plenty of plumbers on YouTube talking about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of like the old. I'm not a lawyer. I don't. I have a lot of friends that are lawyers and stuff, and they say that I'll butcher this one, but the lawyer who has himself for a client, the guy who represents himself in court, has both a fool for a lawyer and a client.
An asshole for
right.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Like, I wouldn't go to someone else's job. I wouldn't go into a lawyer's office and tell him how to be a lawyer. But yet, there are a lot of fabulous videos out there. Just with my juniors this past week, I had them go to Athletic Motion Golf's channel and find, because everything they produce is great stuff. Very fact-based, very measurement-based, very much, here's the commonalities of the game's best players and what they're doing and what you should do. But even if you go to Athletic Motion Golf's channel and find a video that you think is awesome, it might not apply to you. You might do that thing already very well. So not only can you get misled by bad information that's out there, which there's still plenty. There's a ton of bad information out there from a bunch of people. I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but there's a ton of bad information out there by a lot of people. But there's also good information out there that might not apply to you at that time, right? Or you might do that thing already, but not think that you do it. And so then you overdo it, or all kinds of, there's so many pitfalls that you can fall into, even if you're looking at good information overall. It might not apply to you at that time. It might not be your priority. It might not ever be your priority. You might do it perfectly already. And by trying to do what's in the video, you might overdo it. Or you might destroy something that you do really well already. So it's really tough as an individual golfer. It's not your job, right? It's not your job to spend 80 hours a week on thinking about this game like I do. It's a hobby. It's a recreation. Like, some people are very passionate about it and they spend 40 hours a week on it, like outside of their jobs. But it's that time is spent practicing and thinking about the game and playing the game and doing things like that. It's not spent studying the game and how to teach it to people. I didn't hear any of that. You might have hit the mute button. I got nothing.
I hit the unmute thinking
there it is.
The microphone went off, so I hit mute to unmute it. Then I realized the microphone anyway.
You're good now.
So to that point, right? So Athletic Motion Golf has great stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. But in the end, we all have we have our own unique bodies. We have different speeds, different athletic ability. It's a case study of one. It's the person in front of you. And that's my opinion. So you can get caught up in rabbit holes and a whole plethora of, before you know it, it's something simple that if you had a trained set of eyes, they could sort it out for you.
Yeah, it's a case study of one, but we're all human beings. We all have arms that attach at the shoulders. We all have mostly two legs. And I'm obviously not talking about some adaptive golfers or anything like that right now. But generally speaking, we're all built roughly the same, though. We're all human beings with a head here and a pelvis here. And so we're all generally the same. But within that, we all have different movements at different times. We all have different capabilities to generate speed, to do things. On force plates, for example, I would say I have two kinds of golfers. I have jumpers and I have spinners,
Right.
right? So one of my longest players, his vertical peak is only about 140% of his
Right.
body mass. Whereas like my smart to move thing has a dotted line at like 180, which they say is where a good player should kind of get to. And tour players, sometimes they're above 200, right? Pretty easily. The guy I talked about earlier got to 192. Fine. My guy can swing at 132 miles an hour without breaking too much of a sweat, and he gets to 140. So but his rotational speed is through the roof. So he can spin really fast. And so you have to even be like, if he just got a force plate lesson or somebody just looked at his thing and was like, well, you're not meeting the threshold here. Or if he just looked at it, right? Now he's a smart kid, so he's not going to do that necessarily. But if he were someone else and he said, oh, I need to increase my vertical, he might rob himself of his rotational ability at that point, right? He might get worse, right? Just by increasing the one number to meet the threshold or meet what most people do, he might get worse, right? So there are ways that you can leverage technology properly, even with the right understanding. And even if you say, I want to increase my verticals, you can mess up yourself or others, if you don't apply it the right way. So it's a matter of, in his case, like we are working on things that will increase verticals a little bit, but we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul much. We're very aware of his rotational and not trying to diminish that much at all, right? We're just trying to increase the one a little bit. Mostly so he can get forward a little bit more correctly. He's always gotten forward a little bit with his chest. It doesn't create much axis till to impact, so his divots are a little bit too big, and thus he's not as good with wedges and some other things as he should be, because he does tend to hit down a little bit too much. He has the speed to do it with, every other club, but when he gets into shorter clubs, he tends to spin the ball a little too much. It gets up in the air a little too high, and he doesn't control it. It doesn't hop and stop. It tends to kind of hop and pull back, which used to be a sexy shot. But I mean, we really want a ball to just kind of hit and land and stop. We don't want it to like rip back 20 yards.
Yeah, that's or
20 feet.
Be different. It looks cool, but it usually costs you a few strokes.
Yeah, it's great if there's a front pin, but for everything else, good luck. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't have anything further for you, Erik, unless you have something you want to add.
No, I think we covered a lot. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to catch up. We're some of the people that went back like 20 plus years on the golf internet. So we've been arguing with people for a long time, discussing things for a long time. I want to clarify, when I say arguing, I don't always mean like, you're getting angry and yelling at stuff. Like in a courtroom, an argument is just a presentation. It's just a discussion. It's just your side of things. Same with a debate, right?
It's more like a debate, yeah. And
it doesn't mean we're all like yelling at people and,
used to enjoy watching you and Jeff Mann, Dr. Jeffrey Mann.
He's still around. I saw he did something just recently.
Yeah, he's pretty thorough. He's enjoyable. So yeah, Erik, it's been a pleasure, and we'll probably check back in with you at some other point during the future. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. People can find me every week. I will plug one thing. I'll just plug that they can find me I teach at golfevolution.com, but the Spin Axis is my podcast. It's weekly. The episodes are all a little bit shorter than this one. They're all generally about 20 minutes or less. So you can listen on your car ride to work or to the golf course or something like that. And so I do that with Jason Nicola and Tyson Deskins, instructors in Canada and Ohio. So we have some guests on occasionally. Monty was on, like I said, this morning. John Graham is on our next one. We've had Brian Manzella on. We've had Sean Webb and Mike Granato. We've had David Orr on. We've had other people on as well. But some weeks it's just us. Some weeks we have a guest on. But the Spin Axis is the name of the podcast. So check that out.
We'll plug all your socials, including the Spin Axis, to make sure that people can reach you, because I feel that you have some good information. Okay?
Yeah, I don't post too much on socials, but when I do, I hope it's valuable and good.
Good. That's good. So, Erik, thank you. Thanks again. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.